those voices, the things you were told as a child keep just ruminating in your head. And it's hard to fight those thoughts.
I think I grew up feeling very much an inconvenience, like I was just troubled existing and just caused problem. Like, why were you born? Why were you even born? Yeah, I spent the majority of my childhood and even in my young adulthood thinking the world would be better without me. That gets really deep into the essence of who you are, especially as a child.
In all of the good times and even the trials, through tears and through laughter, yeah, I know that I'll smile when I think of you. Smile for the things you do. Smile, God gave me you. You are a reason I smile. Yeah.
This is Behind Our Smiles.
Pursuing connection.
And finding joy.
Even in the struggle. And welcome back to another episode of the Behind Our Smiles Marriage Podcast. We are Joe and Terry Buchanan, and we're so glad you're here.
Yeah, I love hanging out with you. And one of our absolute favorite things about the podcast is when we get to share what makes you smile about your husband or wife. And Michael is sharing today about his wife, Megan. Says, when I think of Megan, the first thing I think of is her contagious laugh. It will light up any room, but also how great a mother she is to our children. Her love and empathy for people is very inspiring. Well, thank you, Michael. And Megan, what incredible things to have said about you. And that's how I feel about you, Tara. Your smile absolutely lights up a room. I love making you laugh. And I love the mother that you are to our children.
This is one of those common themes that we've gotten many times from husbands of what makes them smile about their wife. Often involves taking on that mothering role. There's something that's very attractive about that, at least that's what I read from husbands who say, man, when I see her, loving our children, it just lights them up and makes them smile. And so we're kind of talking about Mother's Day, the elephant in the room.
Well, the elephant in the room for us, but maybe for you, Mother's Day is something you look forward to. You have great memories of your mom. There's a great relationship there, and you look forward to it. For others, it's not the greatest day of the year.
Yeah, a few years ago, we tackled this topic kind of more in depth because in our marriage, it's been like that thing. Because again, mothering is a big part of my life. Joe, I know that you appreciate me as a mother and watch me mother, but there's a lot of baggage in our relationship in regards to Mother's Day that we've had to revisit in our marriage many times. And we're revisiting it on the podcast because it's one of those things like, we don't want to talk about it, but it's the thing. And I know we're not alone, that everybody comes to Mother's Day with a different set of baggage for many different reasons. So today we're kind of share a little bit about what makes it complicated for us and the issues around it.
And how we've worked through those things. And for me, I wasn't able to put my finger on it for many, many years, but we would start to enter the season of Mother's Day, and it's weather change. You're starting to see the commercials on TV. You're starting to see the cards in the store, and it would start to trigger me in a way that I would just be in a bad mood and wouldn't really even know why. And of course, just the memories start coming back and all of those things. And then I think the expectation when you see the commercials and you see the cards and all the Mother's Day celebration is that everybody has the most incredible mom on the planet. And when you haven't had that experience, it can magnify what you've lost.
Well, and I love that you're able to share that, Joe, because again, everyone's got like a different set of circumstances. And sometimes we do focus on the women, especially if we have women who've lost their mothers or women who haven't been able to become mothers. It does seem like a female-centric holiday, that it's still about the emotions of women, which is awesome. But then I'm going, there are men left behind too, not left behind, but that are affected by mothers or lack of mothers. So I think for you to share as a husband too, to say, you're never going to be a mother and you're a father, but what happened to you as a son to a mother greatly affects you to this day. So I do enjoy that you're able to share that from a man's perspective, how Mother's Day affects you, even though you're not a woman or a mother.
Well, and I think what further complicates it is I want you to have a good Mother's Day. And so I can rise to the occasion. I can kind of bite down and just work through it and pretend that everything's fine. And I think for years, that's what we tried to do. And then one year we just said, you know what, we're going to do this a little bit different. We're going to approach this from a little bit more healthy standpoint. And we were able to celebrate Mother's Day a little bit different.
Well, and that was, I think, both of us coming towards each other because So there, for me, Mother's Day was not a negative holiday. I grew up with a loving, caring mother. It was a good holiday to celebrate. And then when I became a mother, it became a big deal to me. Like, wow, I can't believe this privilege and honor that I have, right, to be a mom. And also, as the kids got older too, the idea of having a day to feel appreciated was more of a value. Like, okay, now I understand. Like, mothering is so hard.
Right.
And at the same time, though, then you were going, I want to celebrate you, but this is getting more difficult for me personally. So I wouldn't say that the process was that streamlined. We had to keep kind of moving towards each other to say, how can I care for my wife, but understand too, how can I care for my husband? So it's not always a checklist you can just do. It took a lot of intentional back and forth.
And I think as healing has come, it's gotten better, but also I think we've gotten wiser in how we approach it and how we choose to spend that day in particular. But I think it really doesn't maybe matter what circumstances you're bringing in from this standpoint, that there are so many different circumstances that can bring forth the same kind of results. So if you're sitting in church and they're celebrating moms and you've had a past where your mom has not been the kindest or most wonderful or whatever mom in the world, or maybe your mom has passed away or your mom abandoned you. There's all these things that can go through your mind, but it also can be the other side of it. If you are a mom that doesn't have a great relationship with your kids, or maybe you wanted to be a mom and you were never able to be a mom. So I think even just watching the way churches approach it, I think they've grown in their response to Mother's Day over the years as well.
And again, it's kind of like moving towards each other to finding a way. It's finding a way to make everybody happy, which is actually not possible. But the idea of like moving towards each other, saying, okay, what do you need? And what do I need? And so we talked about this a little bit on the podcast and a lot in our personal life. But when I hear you say in springtime, like, oh, Mother's Day is coming, and like, okay, it's a deal. It's like a thing in your head. And I'm thinking, what is the problem? Now, sometimes it is a vague feeling that you don't even know what the source of it is. And I'm cool with that. But in the past few years, I've noticed that when you were able to articulate what's happening, you're like, I hear my mother's voice. I'm hearing the things she said to me. And in your case, those things are not good. They're not healthy, but you can't get it out of your head. And I'm like, it's so true, because I think there's a lot of people in our lives that their voices are in our heads, and it's very hard to get voices out of your head if you've been told something over and over again. When you're able to articulate that with me, that was really helpful to go, okay, Mother's Day reminds you those voices, that the things you were told as a child and as an adolescent keep just ruminating in your head, and it's hard to like fight those thoughts. And so understanding that helped me to love you better and understand you better.
Right, because by the time I typically say, hey, it's Mother's Day, is because I don't want you to feel like it's personal if I'm being a little bit distant or whatever. If I'm starting to notice that I'm struggling, I'll say, hey, Mother's Day is coming, and could be an indicator. But yeah, back to the voice thing, as an adult, I absolutely know that voice isn't true. My brain can tell you 1,000 times over is that voice doesn't matter. That voice is over. She was going through a hard thing. Whatever response that you want to, whatever truth you can find in that. But it doesn't change the fact that the emotion, the trauma impact of the moment is still very much fresh. And there are times that I can hear my mom's voice, almost like I could literally hear the voice. I could hear the tone. I can see the facial expression. I can't really do it, but it's almost like it's that clear.
Like she's in the other room.
Yeah. Or she's standing over me, or she's...
I think it's the idea of like imprinting, right? The role of a mother and her baby, that there are certain things that we put almost like DNA, right? We imprint them with who we are. Obviously on a DNA level, we do, but how we treat our children when they're young, there's that stamping. And I think that's why it's so hard. And I think around Mother's Day, we normally are celebrating, right? Even like on a joking thing, all the things that mothers say, right? Okay, our mothers say, don't forget to brush your teeth, honey. Or, look both ways before you cross the street. And those things are in your head, hopefully, as an adult. But we have those, as a mother, we're constantly imprinting our kids. We're constantly saying things that we mean to say. And obviously we say things that we don't mean to say, the best of us. But to understand the role of that is so intense and so heavy, to know that the things you say to a child will very well stay with them for decades and decades.
Yeah, and it doesn't just show up out of the blue. It's always circumstance driven, whether it's you can feel the breeze change in the air, and there's a breeze change in the air when it happened before or whatever that is. But a lot of times, and this is where I think we've experienced a lot of growth, is understanding those are the lies I'm saying to myself. So I'm repeating those words back to myself. If I mess up, if I don't get something right, or I feel like I failed, then those are the things that tend to surface first. And as we've experienced God's incredible healing and walk through that work together, that becomes less prominent and quicker recovery times when it does happen. But yeah, I think one time, well, I was asking you if the kids knew I loved them, and you said the thoughts never crossed their mind. It's like, do you think the kids know I love them? And then as we shared through what stimulated that question, you said that's why the role of a mom is so important. And that kind of hung with me. The role of us as parents is so important because, yeah, we're going to fail and we're going to fall short. But if we can love our kids, then they're not going to experience these kinds of things when they're in adulthood.
Because we are the first people, obviously fathers as well, who have that chance to speak truth into our kids' lives. So I could guess some of these things on this question I'm going to ask you, Joe, because I've lived with you for a long time. And just to share, because I know that we're not alone, you're not alone in hearing these things. Unfortunately, there's just so many, like there's similar characters across the world, right?
Yeah.
And you go, did we have the same mom? You know, like when you share your story, especially when it's a hard story, you realize that you're not alone, that there's, you know, it's not like your mom was uniquely the first person to ever say these things. And so it's not about that, but it's about those things that we have to fight and to know that they aren't true. Because I know the things, I don't know if would you say the number one thing that you hear, the voice you hear that is the hardest to get out in terms of your mother's voice? The bad imprinting, we'll say, not the good kind of imprinting.
Oh, you're worthless. And that shows up a lot of different ways. But basically, I think if I had to sum it up in a nutshell, it's that you're not worth anything. I think I grew up feeling very much an inconvenience, very much like I was just troubled existing and just caused problem. Like, why were you born? Why were you even born? Yeah, I spent the majority of my childhood and even in my young adulthood thinking the world would be better without me. And I think it's because of those felt, but it was said in so many different ways. And it was never like, hey, Joe, you're worthless. You know, it was coupled with some things that were said, and not just the things that were said, but the way that they were said and in the tone that they were said. I think when someone talks to you with disdain and really wishing you weren't there, that gets really deep into the essence of who you are, especially as a child, because like you were saying, the stamp, I think the concrete's not dry yet. And so that kind of molded itself. That
even as a child who's not emotionally developed or able to put words to any of these emotions, you know, at a primal level from the time before you could even think in words that worthlessness. And again, like you were mentioning, the words were backed up by actions. So it's not like you're saying one thing and do another. The actions that they took also reinforced that idea. So you're left with like going, I don't know where to even find a way out of this feeling. And you want to, like at the time, you don't know anything else though.
I remember being so heartbroken because I literally was so sad that I was causing problems. Like I didn't want to cause problems. I didn't want to be that. And I don't even know where that thought gets into your head is like, man, I am really, I'm costly, right? I'm in the way. And I felt that way all the way through my childhood. And so, yeah, it's more the tone, the facial expression and the way the words were delivered, even though the words were awful. And there were a lot of words we would never share on this podcast that were equipped or coupled with the things that were said, because they were said out of anger and they were said out of frustration. And now that I'm older and we have our own kids, I understand that the kids aren't the source of the anger or the frustration. It's just it was the easiest place for it to go.
Well, and it's such an example when we contrast what you grew up with, what I grew up with, and then obviously as we parent our own children, this idea of understanding, like, yeah, kids are costly and they do get in the way, but like, it's like in that tension. And I know this as a mom, like those days you're like, oh, I'm really going to lose it, or I'm really upset. But you go, but it's not my child's fault. I have to love them regardless. You know, even the times you kind of go, listen, it's okay. It's okay. I'm upset about you spilling whatever, but I still love you. And you have to counteract that because our sin nature and say, this is what I want. Kids will get in the way of what you want every single time. And if we don't follow the Lord and his leading in our parenting as we're trying to tell the truth to our kids, we're going to end up with joy. Yeah, you're in the way because they are in the way. And in seeing the value of human life at every stage, right? That you did have value at that age, but they didn't see it or choose to acknowledge your value. But the idea of like someone mattering, right? You wanted us to matter to someone and to never get that message from the adults who are caring for you saying, you matter just because you do, right? Not because I said so, but you just matter because you do. And I thought, that's how do you not grow up with that sense? I know it's been incredibly challenging for you to not have that foundation built in terms of your basic worth and basic identity.
Well, and it's hard because you can't go back and just convince yourself that you had value. That's probably I live in the present and now, and trying to understand my value in God as an adult is very difficult, right? To understand where our identity is and to keep coming back to that. I think even if you have a normal adjusted childhood, it's still hard as a human in the world that we live in to live in that freedom of knowing who we are in Christ on a regular basis. But then you couple that with trauma in your past and it becomes extremely difficult. But as I look back, I think one of the things I've realized in more recent years or seasons is I don't know that I've ever equated value to the child, who I was as a child. I've never looked back and been like, oh, they were so wrong. I understand that that was wrong, and I understand that I was wronged and I shouldn't have had to go through that. I get all that. But I don't know that I've ever looked back and actually applied value to that little boy.
That's crazy.
Isn't that wild? And this is a
like,
more
okay,
recent
now
discovery.
I can see, like, okay, as an adult.
But I think more times than not, I find myself, I catch it. But whenever the past is stirred up or whatever, I find myself really wanting to kick that little boy, saying, what the heck are you thinking? Like, I'm mad that I caused the problems. I'm mad that I did things wrong that made me worthless. You know what I mean? Like, more so than looking back and going, man, I do wish I was loved. I don't even know if I'm articulating this correctly, but I think that's been a more realization in the later part of the healing process.
So I have a question for you, like talking about, the role that mothers play in terms of imprinting, again, that sense of value and identity on a kid before they even know. You keep mentioning mistakes. Like, okay, I think the other role of a mother involves this idea of how to deal with failure and how to deal with mistakes. Like I mentioned a minute ago, oh, you spilled the drink, right? Now you've made a big mess and I have to clean it up. But yet we somehow have to say, hey, you know what? It's just a mistake. We'll clean it up. Next time, be more careful. Like that's like a healthy mom. So in your mind, what's the voice of your mother saying to you when you make a mistake?
Oh, yeah. Like, I mean, how dare you? You're worthless. You're a piece of crap. You're this. And I mean, that was very kind in the way that it was
mistake,
articulated.
Just, making a mess and
clean it. I mean, there was a lot of abuse in the way that I had to clean up those messes, even if they weren't mine. Like my brother makes a mess, or it's not my fault.
The dog, yeah.
Yeah, it's still I was the one that in my memory, and I see my brother and now I know it's abuse and trauma. At the time, you think it's normal. This is what it is. But there was a time, like one memory I happen to have, and I don't know if this is a great example to help you in your question, but I was sick and I had thrown up and I got in a lot of trouble for the mess that I made. I had to clean it up, even though I don't know if I had the flu or food poisoning. I don't know what it was, but I was sick. And I remember feeling so guilty for throwing up. Like I was kicking myself. Like I wouldn't have been in trouble if I hadn't thrown up. Mom would love me if I hadn't thrown up. And I just remember thinking those things a lot throughout my childhood of things that happened that weren't. Now I can look back and say, how in the world could that, like if I would never do that to my child. That's ridiculous to think but at the time as a child, you don't know.
So it's a combination of it's your mistake, or even if it's not your mistake. So even if it's not your fault, it's your fault. And number two is if you do make a mistake, then, you have to pay a higher price and there's no getting out of it. There's no like, oh, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Like for me, I made mistakes, and even if my parents got mad at me or got punished, or there was some kind of blowback, obviously, for making a mistake, even if it was intentional. But at the end of the day, you're like, but it's okay. We still love you. You know, like, we'll do better next time, and just don't do this again. Okay, I won't do that again. Like, the idea there's a second chance waiting for you the next day, where I think if your mother's voice is saying, now this is a disqualifier, like there's no second chance.
Carpet, the furniture, whatever it was much more valuable than me. And I knew that. I knew. And looking back on it, you're like, how in the world is that shaggy, ugly carpet more valuable, right? You're now I can actually put some sense to that. But at the time, it was really difficult.
So another question I have, the same idea that, okay, a mother tells the child, who they are, their value, the role of mistakes in their life. And I think the other thing I think as a mother is this idea of their future, of like, okay, you won't be a kid forever. When you grow up, you're going to be this. When you grow up, all these good things we speak into our children's lives, usually because we see a future for them and we see like this bright, amazing thing that, man or woman they're going to become as they grow up. But I know you don't have that same voice in your head. What is the voice in your head in regards to your future when you were a child? Like, what did your mother tell you your future would look like as a man?
There was no future. There really was no. I mean, I think I would have actually been okay if my mom said, "I hope you have kids like you one day." At least there's a future for kids, right?
That's
no,
very
there
true.
was no future. And I literally remember when I got into my 20s, I was shocked that I had made it to my 20s. Like, I thought, man, I've actually arrived. I did not think I would see my 20s. It was very, very depressing for the future.
Or was there good things waiting for you?
No.
I mean, like something I think we always tell our kids.
It was survival. There was no, you're talking about thriving, right? You're talking about
the worldview is very different here. And the future's so bright.
Right. I'm going to rabbit trail for a minute because this caused a lot of tension in our marriage early on, because I'm like, no, we need to enjoy right now. We need to be right now. This is amazing right now. We have food in our fridge. We can pay our bills. We're happy. No one's sick. We're good. And you were always planning for the future. You had stuff on the calendar, and I would finally get to whatever you were looking forward to, and we would do it. And I'd be like, okay, I got there. We're fine. And then the very next day or that afternoon, you've got the next thing planned.
The future is bright.
And it was great. It's great looking back, and it was so good for me. But man, did it stretch me, because I'm like, why are you planning for anything?
So I heard the future is something to look forward to. That's what I grew up thinking. Hey, when you grow up, it's going to be amazing, right? When this happens, it'll be amazing. You'll be successful. Like, this idea of going, the future is something to look forward to. And I still feel that way right now. Whereas for you, your mother's voice was saying, there is no future. So don't even bother. Is that what you think it said?
There's no hope. You're worthless. There's nothing. Yeah. There's nothing for you.
Like, one day you'll be amazing. One day you'll grow up and be something.
Yeah, exactly. I think the times that I actually did set my heart on something or got excited about something and it didn't work out, because I mean, this is not like, oh, poor Joe. This is just the way life was. It just didn't work out. And the literal voice of my mom is, well, what in the world did you think? Why in the world would you think that? You're so stupid. Things don't, in other words, because things, and it's not, you don't see it at the time, or at least I didn't. Now I look back and I look at how poor my mom, my parents, my mom and my dad were, and they were divorced, and I was in and out of foster care, and there's just, no one's keeping track of my future. Right? No, they've got much bigger problems, and you don't realize it at the time, but looking back, I can see, and that doesn't make it right, but no one was telling me anything about my future. My big thing is, man, I hope I have a bed tonight. I hope I get a meal.
Well, I love what you mentioned earlier. I don't love it. I hate it. But this idea of when disappointment happens, right? I know for me, I probably coddle our kids too much. Disappointment happens. Oh no, I'm so sorry. That didn't work out. It'll be okay. And like, oh, but you still did a great job. You tried your best. And even though you didn't win, we kind of do that to our kids, this idea of we don't want them to have to fail at disappointment. Where for you, if disappointment happened, it was like, well, you deserved it.
Right.
And
of course, this is the way it goes, right?
And just sink in it, live in that muck, because that's the way life's going to be. I'm like, that's a whole different world.
And if things went well, I know this drove you crazy, but if things went well for a little while, always knew the shoe was dropping. Always knew it was going to drop. And so I was always like, if it went well for long enough, I started to like actually plan for failure.
But you still, again, now that we've talked about this and we've delved into that, it helps me to love you better too, because now I know that if you start seeing imminent danger right? And something's about to fall apart. Your mother's voice comes in and said, what did you think? You think this was going to work out?
Right.
You know, did you think things were going to be all right? You know, nope, it's all going to fall apart, and I'll be here to laugh at you when it does.
Yep.
I'm like, so now I'm more aware of that it's a temptation, right, to fall into, and those things come to go, oh, my mother's voice is getting too strong, and I've got to like push it down.
Right. And without a relationship with Jesus, that doesn't happen. I think it's really important to bring this up because it really hindered my relationship with God. It really hurt my ability to trust God in the way that I needed to. And God is so patient, and he's so good. He's so good. I mean, he was so patient with me. He just let me walk through those seasons and walk through them with me. And we did the work, and we're seeing the fruit of the healing process, which is amazing because I can trust him today. You see it. I can trust him today a whole lot differently. But I think going back to the important role of a mom or a dad, you instill confidence in your kids so that when they're older, they can trust God. There's such a huge advantage to that. Where for me, I kept thinking God, even after I knew he loved me, and that was an incredible encounter in my life when he demonstrated his love to me. But even after that, I still, even to this day, I think sometimes I'm still waiting for God to go, well, what did you expect? What were you thinking? Of course it's not going to work out. Of course, that's not the God we serve. And when that does happen, it's because I've stepped outside of his will. But I love that we have a God who's extremely patient. But back to what we had referenced earlier and that you said so many years ago is that's why our job is so important.
Well, I think it takes time to replace, if you've been feeling, lies in your head, or if you have a voice of a mother or someone, unhealthy in your life that's loud and strong, to recognize it, to go, okay, this is not God's voice. This is not the truth. This is my mother's voice. This is whoever's voice in my head. But it takes time, to reverse it and say, okay, I've got to fill it with truth and fill with over and over again. And in time, the new voice becomes heavier. So hopefully my voice is in your head,
yes.
And you'll go, I know what my wife's going to say right now.
Right.
I've been around longer than your mother was, but learn to replace, with the voice of mother, the voice of the Holy Spirit, a much better voice to listen to. And I think, first of all, Joe, regarding the issue of worth and matter, to know that we've been created by him is workmanship, right? Like literally crafted, chosen, created in Christ Jesus to do good works in Ephesians 2, which God prepared in advance, right? You were planned, even though on a human level, you weren't planned. In God's economy, you were 100% planned with a purpose, with worth, because you're made in his image and that your life matters. That's what the Bible says. So that's a way more important thing to believe than whatever you may be hearing from your mother.
No, and I'm so grateful that God did spare. He spared my life multiple times over, but he really did set me up. He sets us all apart. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I'm really grateful that God allowed sustainability to happen to be where we are today, for sure. And
Joe, did you know? I'm just quote scripture here.
Okay,
did you
perfect.
know? 1 Corinthians 3:16. Did you not know? Did you know that you are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in you? And I love this verse too, because especially regarding your body, right? That your body was violated. People hurt your body as if it was worthless and it was just disposable. And to go, no, you are God's temple. And God's Spirit dwells in you. God was with you in those times that your temple was being abused and hurt. But that's the truth. The truth is you're not disposable. You're not just something to hit and play around with, but you are God's temple, and our bodies have incredible value and incredible worth to him as well. So that's just replacing the things that you want to believe with things that you know are true. And of course, we always come down to Psalm 139 over and over again, that God, you were knit in your mother's womb, even though in a sense that there were things coming against you that maybe you didn't survive that. But God did have a plan for you, and that you are fearfully and wonderfully made, 100%. And I know that because I live with you.
Thank you.
And I think it's very, very true. So just to kind of remember all those things. And of course, Joe, you mentioned earlier about God's love for us, right? That it's hard to believe that that's a hard thing for you to believe, but you have to keep telling yourself that, right? What love that God Father has given to us, that we should be called children of God. And that's primarily your identity, not your child of this man and this woman, or this man and this woman, even though that's nice to have, that ultimately speaking, that is not who you are. You're a child of God first and foremost, regardless of whether your parents have failed you at whatever level, because all of our parents will fail us at some level, either small ways or in completely destructive ways. I just want you to be encouraged, if I can encourage you like that. And I know it's hard to believe, but you have to keep telling yourself these things till they stick.
Yeah, maybe you're listening and maybe a question you may have is, how do you get those voices out of your head, right? And they do show up, and they're not invited, and they show up at the wrong times, and I hate it. But I think for me, the best answer is number one, Tara, you've been an incredible friend, also an amazing wife and lover and all that, but you've been an amazing friend to walk through this with, but a constant reminder that you have to replace those voices. I have to replace those voices with the truth. So when I'm experiencing that, I have to continue to go lean back on some of the scripture we just shared, but also just speaking that truth. This is what God really thinks. This is what God really thinks. And for me, the easiest thing, all I have to do is look at my kids. I look at my kids. I look at you, Tara, but I look at my kids and I go, I know how God feels about them. He feels that way about me. So then I can speak that in. And over time, those voices of truth become louder. So if you are struggling with that, it's not an overnight thing.
It takes time.
It's okay that you're struggling with that. I used to beat myself up like there was no tomorrow because I couldn't get over it. I'm an adult. I understand it. It all makes sense in my brain. Why can't I make this happen? And yet we don't work that way. That's not the way God made us. And I'm really grateful He didn't make us that way. But we have to speak truth into our lives to replace those voices.
And for the moms who have children, especially when they are young, to say, the things we say to our kids stick. Whether we like it or not. There's stuff that sticks that we wish didn't stick. And there's stuff that we go, no, I'm glad I always reminded my kids of this. And maybe it's even something funny that you say or different things, but just to go, that matters, right? It matters. Because at least my opinion is, I've been raising kids now, is our voices become a little quieter as they get older. They have to kind of basically develop as adults, and they can't just listen to us all day. But in those primary years, we basically are the hands and feet of Jesus. We're telling them, again, who they are and how they deal with their weaknesses and what their future looks like. That's our role. So to take that with such gravity and with such seriousness, and that what we are doing matters in the next generation.
Yeah, and we are not grandparents yet, but I've heard when you become grandparents, you see that on full display. The things you told your kids, now they're telling their kids.
I hope you have a kid just like you. Right. That might be relevant to our situation. I don't know.
We would love to hear from you, honestly. If this is some topic that it's not easy, these types of things, but they're worthwhile to talk through and to work through. And if you are in a season of struggle right now, you just want someone to pray for you, you just want someone to listen, please drop us a line anytime. Tara, Tara at behindoursmiles.com. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
We'll see you again next week.